Welcome to LOA Today. Walt Thiessen and life coach Cindy Chavez here on this Wednesday, December the 12th, 2018. It's 8 a.m. New York time, 5 a.m. Los Angeles time, 1 p.m. London time, and in Sydney, Australia, it is 12 midnight. Whew. Crazy. People listen to the show at all hours of the day, Cindy. I love it. I just love it. I get blown away every time I do the times because it just reminds me of how we have these loyal listeners from all over the world tuning in and listening to us, especially the people who are listening to the live stream on Facebook's Law of Attraction Changed My Life group. And it's great. I just love it so much. So thank you, everybody who's listening. And actually, we have three of us here today because Harmony the cat is sitting in my lap and insisting to be a part of the show. So you may see her pop in here. I'll show you a picture over there. She is right there. You'll see her pop in periodically.
When you were introducing us, I was expecting you to say Life Coach Cindy Chavez and
Harmony the cat, right? I thought about that. I actually did think of saying that. That's great.
She just wants a warm lap, I bet.
Pretty much, yeah. Well, she likes that, and she has her routines. We all have routines, right? Well, her routine is she wants to sit in my lap at some point in the morning, get her pets, and then go into the living room and sit in my wife's lap for an hour or so, get her pets, go off and do her thing, sleep for most of the day, and then in the evening go to my wife's lap again and get her pets because that's a routine, right?
Making the rounds.
It's a tough job, but somebody's got to do it.
Somebody has to do it. That's right.
So
it is. Do the cats go outside much when it's cold in the winter?
They do. They just don't stay out. I mean,
Okay.
today temps are like mid-20s, which isn't all that cooler than what you were at right now because you were telling me before we got started you were in the low 30s. And when it gets that cold, they'll go out for just long enough to do their business and then come back in, and that's about it. And if it gets down into the teens, then it's even a debate of whether they'll go in or just go find the litter box downstairs,
I used to have a little Maltese puppy, my little doggy, and I would just open the door. When she needed to go out, she would tell me. I'd open the door. She'd go out, do her thing, and come back in, except for if it was raining. I would open the door, and she would start backing up, walking backwards back into the house. Yeah, right. No, I'm not going out there. So I don't blame you. But it is cold. It's finally getting cold here, and I'm ready for it to stop already.
I believe you, especially considering what you're used to climate-wise. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Anybody who lives in a warm climate, it's a big shift when you have cold weather. It's a huge shift.
Right?
Yeah.
I know that when I was a kid, we moved across the country for a year. So born and raised in California, and then in the 5th grade, moved across the country to Indiana. And it really was not a good experience for me. But one of the things that kind of taught me in retrospect, being an adult and looking back, is that when people talk about culture shock, moving from one place to another, that everything is different, the people are different, the food is different, the weather is different. The weather really makes a difference. Mm-hmm. I mean, it really does affect you to move to a place that has a completely different climate. It's just, it's a shock to your system, I think.
Yeah. Oh, no doubt about it. Yeah, no doubt at all. By the way, we want to encourage people who are listening to the live stream in the Facebook group, feel free to put questions in, because even though we're going to be doing more discussion about Neville's book, The Power of Awareness, I think we're up to chapter 18, we welcome questions not only about Neville, but just about anything regarding law of attraction that you may have. So, as we're going along here, I'll be monitoring. Feel free to type your questions in. And I also want to add a second thing. This is something I thought about this morning, Cindy, when I was waking up. It occurs to me, we talk often about creating our new story, right? And creating our little vignettes of what we're trying to attract into our lives and trying to repeat those. Well, we should probably be doing that more on the podcast, Because we spend a lot of time talking about what's wrong because people want to know, well, here's what's wrong and how do I fix it? And that makes sense. But shouldn't we be spending more time telling our new stories?
Or, what I really thought you meant when you first said that, and I think this is a good idea too, is when someone has a situation that they want help with, it would be great to help them create a new story.
Yes, exactly.
Because sometimes that's really difficult. I know we've talked about that before, but coming up with a new story, because the old story is so familiar and it's so easy for us to tell because we tell it all the time, whether we're talking out loud or whether we're just telling it to ourselves in our head.
Right.
Sometimes we have to create a new a new path for the neurons to fire. I think a new neural path of using language, and so that's a great thing too. Is we can maybe help you script a new story. Come up with some ideas, brainstorm some ideas about what that new story could be.
Exactly. Yeah, no, I agree with you. So I would encourage anyone who's listening to the live stream who wants to participate in this, just type your story as best you can right now, based on what you understand about how to type your news story, and we'll look it over, we'll read it, and we'll maybe give you some suggestions on how to improve it, and we'll just help you to write it, because that's the other thing about writing. Most people think that the big difficulty with writing is the writing. Actually, the big difficulty is the editing. That's what takes all the time. So we're going to do editing. We're going to help edit your story and help you make your story a better story.
I think it's a great idea.
Yeah.
The story workshop. Yeah.
The story. Oh, I like that. The story workshop. Yeah, that's good. Okay. So
see, Neville talks about stories a lot, new stories. And as a matter of fact, this is funny. We've talked about this once before, or maybe twice, and it's an affirmation that I picked up somewhere along the line and couldn't remember where I got it from. I really thought I got it from the book Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill. That's in my mind, in my memory, that's where I thought I had read about it. So I searched it because it came up in my memory. And again last night, in the middle of the night, I woke up for a few minutes and I had this affirmation running through my head. So when I came in this morning for the podcast, I did a little search on it again. It was a scientist, Robert Millikan, but the place where it shows up is in one of Neville's books. So I guess I actually read it in a Neville book.
Huh.
And the little piece that I was reading, the affirmation is, I have a lavish, steady, dependable income consistent with integrity and mutual benefit. And I've always thought that's such an outstanding affirmation.
Good.
Covers all the bases, right? And the little piece that, when Neville was relaying the story about it, very clear to say, when Robert Millikan was very poor, he developed this affirmation, ended up becoming very wealthy. But note that he was telling it as a present story. Like, this is how we write affirmations. I have a lavish, steady, dependable income. Not I'm going to have.
Right.
Not I will feel secure.
Right.
Not I will have more than enough. But I have. It was in the present tense. And so that's a little clue about storytelling, the stories that we tell. We have no problem telling those uncomfortable stories about what we're going through in the present tense. Oh, things are so hard. I'm going through this. This has really been tough right now. But then we have a tendency, even when we try to get into the new storytelling, sometimes we'll say, but I'm going to get myself out of this. Things are going to be better. I'm going to create a better life, right? It's all in the future. And if we keep telling those stories in the future, they'll just kind of stay off in the future. So this is why Neville is so, he says over and over, he's so insistent on telling the story as if you already have it, assuming the feeling of the wish fulfilled.
Right. No, I agree. I agree completely. I think it's a good idea. In fact, it occurs to me that the stories that we're telling so often are stories that we're telling because we think we're getting better telling them, and we're actually making it worse. That's the thing that gets me. I mean, like you just described, we tell the same old stories over and over again, but we make small modifications to them, and now we think we're telling our good news story. And so often we're undermining ourselves.
I told a lot, and in my mind, in the telling of it, it was, I was picturing my telling of it as being optimistic and grateful, right? And the story was that one of two things. It was regarding money. So it was either we always have enough or, we always make it. And one day I realized that's not the story that I want to be telling. I don't want to be creating a life where there's always just enough, it always comes just in time, and somehow we always make it, right?
Exactly. Yes.
And when I recognized that, because here I was thinking that I was putting on a very optimistic kind of, you know, face about it, right? It's like, no, we always have enough. We don't go without. And those things are true. And I was grateful that we didn't go without. We always had enough, and there always seemed to come in just enough what we needed right at the right amount of time. Until one day I realized, yeah, that's not the story. I don't want to set the bar right there.
Exactly. Well, for me, that it was always the same thing. It was just enough, and it came in just at the last minute, and that drove me crazy. Like, I don't want to have to live waiting for the last minute for the thing to show up just before the catastrophe hits. No, that's not a way to live.
Could it be worse? Yes, it could be worse, but that doesn't mean that the standard is there. You know,
right?
We can set the standard a little higher. We can look for something a little better. We can tell a better story, and so that's all part of it. It's recognizing the story you're telling now.
Now we have a question already. Nasha asks, does Neville say anything about telepathy? Do you know if he says anything about telepathy?
It's a good question, because we have heard a little bit where he's talked about thoughts and dreams and maybe, but is in my knowing, it's not something I've heard him go into in a deep way. That doesn't mean it's not there. I haven't covered all of Neville. I know there's Neville lectures I haven't heard.
Right.
Probably a book or two that I haven't really, really dived deep into.
She also has a second question. For example, if I want a certain friend to call me and apologize for being rude, how do I attract that? That's an interesting question.
Well, what I like to do in that situation, so it sounds to me like you have had an experience with a certain friend, and there's a story there. So I'm not asking you to do this, but if I were coaching you, I may ask you in a private situation, well, tell me what happened, right? Mm-hmm. And so you would tell me a few sentences about what happened. Maybe you had a conversation that didn't feel good, didn't go well. And so there was since you're wanting an apology for some kind of rudeness, apparently some kind of rudeness happened. What I would do, what I believe Neville would have you do, if you were to ask him, would be to go into that greater dimensional space. In other words, tap in to the memory of that with your imagination, but imagine it going completely different than it went. Mm. In other words, whatever happened, maybe your friend caught themselves immediately and said, oh, that was rude. Please forgive me. I'm sorry about that.
Right.
And maybe you replied, oh, it's okay. You know, we're all human. We make mistakes. It's okay. No big deal. Right. Mm-hmm. Or whatever. So you're creating a little vignette, as you are, a little story that's a lot better than the one that you remember actually happened. Don't let it be too long and winding. Let it be a few sentences, something you could wrap up, and really something that has no charge on it, right? It's like, if that would have happened that way, someone does something rude and then they say, oh my goodness, why did I say that? That was the rudest thing ever. I'm sorry. I never want to treat you that way. Please forgive me. And you go, oh my goodness, it's okay. No big deal. And you probably just never think of it again, right?
That's right.
It doesn't play over and over in your head like this story that actually happened. So that's what you want to do. You want to create a story that feels better, a conversation, and just spend a few moments thinking about that, thinking of it that way, remembering it that way. I love this idea of, because of the word remember, like we're doing it over, right? It's like we're revisiting it and reviewing it and remembering it. I'm going to create a different memory about it.
Exactly.
So that's what I would try. I would try that whenever you think about the person or the situation, do that.
The interesting thing, too, when you do that, you basically are taking the sting away from it.
Yes.
And when you take the sting away from it, you actually get to the point where it almost doesn't even matter whether they apologize, because you just feel better. And like you said, you left it behind. You know, you just kind of forgot about it.
And that's another point, is pay attention to how you feel. Like, let yourself feel good in the new memory. Recognize that it feels good, that it feels so much better. Maybe it feels light. Maybe like the way I told it, you know, there's some laughter there. Oh my goodness, you know, let it feel better. And this is correct. Most of the time, this is why we're doing it, because the charge that you're feeling emotionally when you think about it is still there, and we want to erase that. And then, because our present is built on the past, right? Everything we think, everything we do, it's creating the next moments. Because of that, this is actually changing the energy of the past, and many times you will see something happen in the present that will change.
And
Nasha's, you might get that phone call.
That's right. Well,
but Nasha, you know what? It won't really matter. It won't really matter. If you do get the phone call or the apology, it'll feel like the cherry on top of the cake, but it won't be necessary because you've dismissed the charge.
Well, Nasha wrote back a couple things. She says, "Can I change the story? Like the person was never rude, and create a new story?" And then shortly after that, she says, "Well, he messaged me too. He messaged me." So I don't know if that's right now or not, but like, oh wow, that'd be a really quick response. That'd be great, you know.
It wouldn't surprise me.
It wouldn't surprise me either, because that's the way the stuff works. Also, we have a message from Sarah. She says, "I just want to thank you guys for your live video the other day. It gave me the push I needed to get back into the good mindset I needed." Well, you're welcome, and congratulations, Great. Sarah, because you're the one who moved yourself back into that mindset. We just gave you an idea of how to do it. But you did it, so well done, girl. Way to go. All right.
Well done.
Yeah. And Shireen says, "Can I manifest healing to my teeth? How can I feel better when I'm facing tough decisions to be made in the next 13 days? So she's got some imminent stuff that she's dealing with.
Well, then it's important that you feel better now.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And we can heal anything. Teeth heal themselves. A lot of people don't know that because we've been taught differently, but there's a lot of information out there now where people are talking about that, mm-hmm. Teeth will heal.
Yeah.
So, I think that if we can believe it, if we can imagine it, we can do it. I think Neville would agree.
I think so too. Yeah. I really don't think there were any limits, except our belief in our imaginations.
Right. Our limits.
Yes.
The limits that we place, and most of those limits are there for good reason. They're there because it's what we've been taught over and over.
Right.
Like I've heard Abraham talk before about certain things like growing a missing limb back. Well, most of us have been taught over and over that that's impossible. Abraham would probably say, if we wouldn't put it in the category of something impossible, then we'd see it happen a lot more often. So yeah. I think, whatever we can believe for. But the important part now is if you're facing imminent decisions and you want to feel better, is decide to feel better.
Yes.
Just decide to feel better. One of my colleagues did a video recently, a short video about that was really great because that's what she said. She said, when you wake up in the morning, you can decide, today I'm going to be in a good mood. Just make that decision.
True.
Then stay on track with it.
Yep.
Just like anything else. It's a decision.
That's true.
Hope that's helpful.
I think you've nailed it. That's exactly right. And, by the way, Nasha is reinforcing that she was communicating telepathically with her friend, and her friend's been messaging her, so she's really excited about that. And Brenda says, "It seems to take a long time to manifest anything. Is there a way I can speed up the process?" That's a common complaint. Stuff just isn't showing up quickly enough. What can I do about that?
I think that we covered this a few podcasts ago when we talked about passion or the level of emotion. We've talked about assuming the feeling of the wish, and we've talked about the difference between emotions and feelings. And really, I think it's important that we recognize that sometimes it's easier to tap into the feelings, the physical feelings, like your hands on the table or your feet on the floor or shaking the hand of a friend or holding a glass of water in your hand. Like we're feeling those things in our imagination. And once we keep doing that, we can tap into the emotions, which is when we start feeling an emotion, we start feeling happy, we start feeling excited. I think that the level of emotion is connected to the speed at which we are able to manifest things.
I agree. I totally agree. I think that's a huge thing, and I reinforced that for myself when dealing with my wife's medical issue recently, because there was that one day where I haven't really given the details, and I'm not ready to really give the details. It's quite a story, but there was one day where we got really, really bad information, and it really upset us a lot. But it also sent my passion for helping to cure my wife, to help her get over this. It sent it through the roof. And within hours of that, like within 24 hours, all of a sudden we had this huge shift that happened in what the information we were being presented. So clearly the passion made a big, big difference. And we were both of us, it wasn't just me, both of us were experiencing that level of passion. We were just determined it was not going to be this really, really bad thing. It was going to be something that we can deal with and get over more quickly. And within 24 hours, that's what we got.
Yeah, so and not to oversimplify it or make it seem super easy, but because it's not always, and sometimes this practice takes practice.
It does,
and so it's not always easy, especially in the beginning. But I think that's what brings the speed to the process is the level of emotion. And sometimes when I've been in a place where I've been trying to manifest something and it's not really happening, one of the things that I realize is I've gone back and kind of gone a little deeper with myself about, do I really want this? Maybe I don't even really want this. Maybe for some reason I think I should have it, or I think it's the right direction, or maybe it's the how. Maybe I'm really trying to manifest the how. Like even in this question we got about telepathy, about wanting an apology. Part of that sometimes is the how, because what we really want is to not feel the sting of this memory anymore. What we really want is whatever we're making that memory mean about us, right? Or about our relationship. We're attaching some kind of meaning to it, and that story doesn't feel good to us, so we want to change it.
Right.
And it can be changed in lots of different ways. So sometimes we try to manifest, a how, and sometimes we're not really passionate about what we're trying to manifest. Maybe it's just the thing we think we have the possibility of it happening. Like maybe it's not the job we really want, but we think it's the one we can get, so we start trying to manifest it, and we don't have a lot of oomph about it. There's not a lot of passion or emotion or excitement about it.
It's a good point. It's a really good point. It's a reminder to always be double checking whenever the emotional pitch is not getting very high at all, or maybe you can't even find it. It's a good time to ask, am I asking for what I really want? Because and the obvious one that I can think of for that is money, because money itself, you can't really get emotional about money. What you get emotional about is what you're going to do with it. But the money itself, here's a pile of bills. Well, isn't that nice? That's about the level of emotion that's associated with it, But when you start thinking in terms of how you're going to use it, then it becomes a different situation entirely. You can build the feeling. So I think it's a good reminder. Every time that the emotion isn't getting really big, double check. Just make sure. Doesn't mean you have to change it necessarily. It still may be appropriate, but it's an opportunity to check. Just say, well, maybe there's a better way.
I like to ask, when I'm coaching someone, often I like to ask a scaling question, right? And give it a definition. So it's like, okay, you're telling me you want whatever it is on a scale of 1 to 10. With 1, if you don't get it, not a big deal, but it'd be nice. And 10 is you are willing to commit to making this thing happen. You want this thing. Like it's over the top. Where are you? I've actually had someone, one time I had someone say, I guess I'm about a 5. I don't really think I want this very badly. But it really was like a revelation, right?
Yeah.
Like they came to the call thinking that they really wanted this thing. Once they talked it through and once they asked themselves, where am I on that scale? And one thing I'll say about a scaling question is let it be easy. Go with whatever comes up to you first. Like it's an intuitive thing most of the time, right? It's like if you have a pain in your body and I say, well, on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1, you barely notice it, and 10, you want me to take you to the hospital right now, like call an ambulance. Where are you on that scale? Most of the time, someone can say, oh, I'm a 6, I'm a 3. I mean, right away, it's just the number is there. So go with that. That's another really good way to find out or just ask yourself, how excited am I about manifesting this?
Now, of course, there is the flip side of the coin, which is we can build the feeling up. So I think what we're trying to say here is make sure you know what you're building up before you build it up. But it is possible to build it up because all you do is just focus on it. That's just law of attraction. You keep focusing on it, you're going to build up the feeling over time. So you do have that option available. This is just kind of like a cautionary tale. Like, make sure you're asking for what you really want, because, if it shows up and you're kind of nonplussed, well, that wasn't really the best kind of request for you to make, was it?
Yeah, and I believe Neville had an entire chapter on desire. And,
yes.
That's one of the things is if you're just not really feeling any juice for this thing, then you probably need to do a little digging and figure out what would be better. What do you want more? What are you curious about? Follow curiosity. That's a good one, too.
That is a good one, yep. So let's see.
I hope that helps. I hope you just come back to the next podcast and tell us that you're just manifesting at the speed of light.
Yeah. Well, Shireen, who asked the question about the teeth and about making tough decisions, she said, I need to make a decision between two choices. How can I make the better decision? And this ties in directly to what we just talked about, but
I'll tell you something my husband did the other day, and it wasn't over a big, important decision. It was just about making an order in a restaurant, but he was trying to decide between two things. And he said to the waiter, it's like flip a coin, right? He said to the waiter, pick a number, 1 or 2. And the waiter said 2. And he said, oh. And he said, okay. And I love that trick, right? It's like flip a coin, and then when it lands, your body will give you a good indication if that's the one you wanted.
Right.
It's like flip a coin, heads or tails, okay, and then it's tails, and you go, oh, okay, well then it's the other one.
That's what you say. Well, we'll flip it again.
Right. Sometimes we don't know though until we have that gut reaction.
That's true.
It's just a really good way to test.
Actually, another way to do the same kind of thing, especially in a restaurant, you're having trouble deciding between two things. I'll think about the two things, and one of them is something I've never had before, and it's kind of intriguing, but I'm a little bit afraid of it. So I'll say to the waiter, I'll say to the waiter, is it any good? And if the waiter says anything like, oh, it's fabulous, they'll say, okay, I'll take it. But if the waiter gives me any reaction like, yeah, it's all right, no, forget that, I'm having the other one.
Okay, never mind. Going back to Old Faithful.
That's right. So, yeah, there are a lot of strategies.
Here. It's like both of us are sort of the same about once we find something we like, we can just go back to a restaurant and order the exact same thing every single time. It's like, and my other friend just drives her crazy. She's like, order something different. I don't want anything different. I know I really like this. I'm going to enjoy it. I'm fine with it. But you've never tried anything else on the menu. I really don't need to. And sometimes we make ourselves go out of the comfort zone and order something different, or do something different just to shake up those neural firings a little bit, so we're not building all those grooves of everything always being the same. It's important to shake it up once in a while.
And we were doing that yesterday, not grooving. We were doing the same groove again, because we have a Chinese restaurant nearby that does a very good job, and we always order the same thing for takeout. It's always General Tso chicken, and called up last night, and it's not just General Tso chicken. We also get mixed vegetables in the General Tso sauce, so we get the same flavoring for both. And we call that in, and as soon as we start saying the General Tso sauce for the mixed vegetables, oh, is this for Walt?
Right.
Yeah, we've ordered that one a few times.
So one day you're going to call the order, and they're going to say, "Oh, we're sorry, we're out of that today," and you'll be like, "Oh, I don't."
We had that experience recently, although not quite that way. We called in to place the order, and they said, well, I think you'll probably have to wait for another day. And I said, why? And they said, because there was an auto accident out front, and they got the road blocked in both directions. You can't get to us to pick up the order. So we had to completely the universe was saying, no, shake it up. And I go to Louise, I said, well, explain the story. And she says, well, now what are we going to do?
Plan B. We need to hurry.
And we didn't have a plan B. Oh, that was funny.
Well, I'm thinking that we need to do the promos before we
dive
in.
We should. Wait a minute. Do we have another question here? Oh, no, I guess we got. All right. We have some comments. Siraj has been making some interesting comments. Well, it's kind of a question. He says, I get lots of choices almost too many in terms of ideas for work. When everything looks fabulous, how do you focus on one thing? So I get lots of choices, almost too many in terms of work, of ideas for work. When everything looks fabulous, how do you focus on one thing? That's a good question.
I think you used the Sudbury School method. You just pick one. If they're all fabulous, you pick one and see how you like it.
I agree with you. I think it's absolutely true. And the nice thing is you can't lose because they all look good, you know? So no matter what you do, it's going to be a good experience.
Yeah, congratulations on having lots of fabulous choices.
Absolutely.
I think a lot of us would want to be there, right?
Right. Yeah. So, yeah. Okay. So, promos. First of all, are you a subscriber? If you're not, why aren't you? Become a subscriber so you can get all the episodes coming directly to your smartphone every day. If you're listening on the live stream, the links for becoming a subscriber are in the description for the post where you're seeing the live stream. If you're listening to the podcast, they're in the description for the podcast. But whichever way you're listening, make sure that you become a subscriber so you're getting all the episodes coming right to your smartphone. If you can't find the link, by the way, just go to the homepage of our website at loatoday.net, and you'll find two great big icons there, one for Apple devices and one for Android devices, and it'll set you right up. Just click on the right device. And once you're a subscriber, and also for non-subscribers, but for everybody, please share the fact that you're listening to the podcast, because somebody shared with you, you saw it in a group, somebody shared it in a post, you saw a tweet, something like that, and that's how you found out about the show. Well, other people need to find out too, so pass it along. And the more that we pass it along, the more people get their daily dose of happy. So please get your daily dose of happy and share it with somebody else, and make sure that you're subscribing so you don't miss any of the episodes that come along. And one final message too, if you are listening on the live stream, feel free to jump in with your own questions and your own input. In fact, if you want to share your news story, tell us what your news story is, and we'll share your news story on the podcast, like we did with Nasha. Nasha's telling her news story. I'm still not sure whether or not that actually happened, but it doesn't matter. She's telling us the story, and that's the most important thing.
Yes, so. Love it. All right. Well,
so let's get into it.
We are working our way through Neville's book, The Power of Awareness, and we are currently on chapter 18. And the title of the chapter is a little phrase that's taken from a New Testament scripture that he leads off with from James. It says, "Be ye doers." It kind of took me by surprise.
Yes.
Because we often talk about that sometimes the first thought in our mind when we want to manifest something, or when we want to unmanifest something, is what do I do? And we often talk about it's alignment first, but apparently Neville's going to talk about doing. So let's see what he says. He says, "Be ye doers of the word, and not hearers only, deceiving your own selves. For if any be a hearer of the word, and not a doer, he is like unto a man beholding his natural face in a glass, and goes his way, and straightway forgets what manner of man he was. But whoso looketh into the perfect law of liberty, and continue therein, he being not a forgetful hearer, but a doer of the work, this man shall be blessed in his deed." And then Neville starts explaining that verse. He says the word in this quotation means idea, concept, or desire. You deceive yourself by hearing only when you expect your desire to be fulfilled through mere wishful thinking. Your desire is what you want to be, and looking at yourself in a glass is seeing your imagination as that person. Forgetting what manner of man you are is failing to persist in your assumption. The perfect law of liberty is the law which makes possible liberation from limitation. That is the law of assumption. To continue in the perfect law of liberty is to persist in the assumption that your desire is already fulfilled. You are not a forgetful hearer when you keep the feeling of your wish fulfilled constantly alive in your consciousness. This makes you a doer of the work, and you are blessed in your deed by the inevitable realization of your desire. I think what's interesting here is this analogy of the mirror, or he says in a glass, right? A looking glass, a mirror.
Right.
And that in this analogy he's using, when we look into the mirror, when we see our ideal self in the glass, that's what's happening in our imagination. We are assuming the feeling of the wish, and we are recognizing ourself as that person that has that thing already. But in this verse that he quotes, he says, if the man beholds his natural face in the glass and then goes on his way and forgets, so he forgot what he saw in the mirror. He forgets what manner of man he is, or what kind of person. So he's saying, when we tap into that ideal version of ourselves, when we are imagining that we've already accomplished what it is we're setting out to create, when we're assuming that feeling of the wish, that we have to hold on to that. You know, it reminds me of the story of Joe Dispenza's daughter, when a famous story when she was a teenager and she told her dad he would take her shopping all the time.
Right.
And he would sit in the chair. My husband calls those chairs the husband chairs. You know, the chairs
yes, right.
by the waiting room. He by the dressing room. He would sit in the chair and she would come out and he would tell her no. You know, I don't know if it was he was deciding what she was allowed to wear, or maybe how much money she was allowed to spend. I think it was that. And he would say, no, not that one. Okay, you can get this one. And finally she said one day, Dad, I want to manifest a shopping trip with no limits. And so because he's in this business of, you know, helping people consciously create their desires, and he had taught her how to manifest, how to create. And one of the things he said to her that always stuck with me is he would do his meditation and she would do hers early in the morning. He said they would be coming out, you know, after they woke up, and he would say to her, did you do your meditation? No. Well, go back in and do it. You know, he was holding her accountable to every day to assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled, basically.
Right.
And he told her, now, you know, when you get up from that chair, from your meditation, you can't be the girl that wants a shopping trip. You have to be the girl that's had the shopping trip.
Mm.
So when, you know, it reminds me of this verse. When you walk away from the mirror, you can't forget what you saw in there.
It's the one thing we do most often. We forget that we have a direct role. And the idea of doers, I like this a lot, because most often in these conversations we hear about do your feeling and not your doing. And the doing that we refer to is going out in the world and doing something. But the doing he's talking about here is the internal work. It's the creating and telling that new story over and over again. That's the mirror work. And it's a different take on what doing is, but I like it because it's really the right kind of doing to be doing.
Right. And I think that's it, is that it's so easy to tap into the feeling of the wish fulfilled and then get up from the chair and go about our business, and suddenly we're not holding on to that feeling. We're no longer the person that we were just 5 minutes ago while we were in our meditation, when I was that person that had those things I wanted already. It was who I was. I was the person that owned those things. I was the person that accomplished those things.
Right.
I was the person that could do that thing or master that thing. And then I get up and 5 minutes later, and I'm back to my old self where I haven't achieved it yet.
Yeah, it's almost like, okay, I'm done with that. Now let's go back to where I was before.
So he says, you must be doers of the law of assumption. For without application, the most profound understanding will not produce any desired result. So we have to apply it. He says, frequent reiteration and repetition of important basic truths runs through these pages. Where the law of assumption is concerned, the law that sets man free, this is a good thing. It should be made clear again and again, even at the risk of repetition. The real truth seeker will welcome this aid in concentrating his attention upon the law which sets him free. The parable of the master's condemnation of the servant who neglected to use the talent given him is clear and unmistakable. Having discovered within yourself the key to the treasure house, you should be like the good servant, who by wise use multiplied by many times the talents entrusted to him. The talent entrusted to you is the power to consciously determine your assumption. The talent not used, like the limb not exercised, withers and finally atrophies. What you must strive after is being. In order to do so, it's necessary to be. The end of yearning is to be. I love that he's stressing this, to be. To be what? To be who? To be the person that has that thing.
Right.
Be the person that does that thing.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever it is that you're wanting to be or do or have, it's the being. It's the identity. Your concept of yourself can only be driven out of consciousness by another concept of yourself.
Yeah.
And that's what we were talking about a minute ago, right?
That's right.
We build that concept of our new self with our new story, the one who's already accomplished these things. Then we get up from the meditation and we go in the other room and we become the old concept of ourself, and it drives that one right out. So we have to be willing to repeat it over and over until it hardens into fact.
Right. Yep,
By
that's
creating an idea. Go ahead.
I was just confirming. Yes, that's it.
Yeah. By creating an ideal in your mind. You can identify yourself with it until you become one and the same with the ideal, thereby transforming yourself into it. The dynamic prevails over the static, the active over the passive. One who is a doer is magnetic and therefore infinitely more creative than any who merely hear. Be among the doers.
So he's actually issuing a challenge to you and I, but also to our live listeners and to our recorded listeners of the recording, because we're all listening to this thing. Are we doing the action of focusing on telling our new story and then continuing to tell our new story even when we're done with the mirror work? Because that's what he's saying. We got to be the doers. We got to be the ones who continue to tell that story and to live that story and to be that story and to believe in that story. Yeah.
And so it's consistent.
That's right.
It's the consistency of it, that it happens over and over. And eventually that's just who we are. We just become that. Sometimes it happens really quickly.
It can. Yeah.
I've had it happen very quickly. But part of it is just knowing what you want, getting clear around what you want, and then being able to hold that vision. And like Neville says, don't just be a hearer. I remember at one point, I was looking for another book because I love books and I love learning and I'm always learning something else. But one day I was looking for a book and a new thing, new thing to learn. And my higher self spoke to me really strongly and said, you have to actually do these things. You know enough.
Mm-hmm.
Take a break and make sure that you're not just hearing all this stuff. You're not just taking it into your mind,
right?
But that you're actually practicing it.
Yes.
Love it when my higher self gives me a little kick.
Especially when it's good information like that. That's good stuff. By the way, I got to pass along a message. Siraj said, he says, looking cool today, Walt. Are you manifesting for aging process? I hope he means that I'm manifesting looking younger. If that's what he means, then yes, that actually is one of my things that I'm trying to manifest. So if that's what you're seeing, thank you. I appreciate the input. That helps.
Excellent. Every day in every way, I'm getting younger and younger and younger.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so we finished up with 18, and we've got time to dive into chapter 19. And the title of it is Essentials, which I like, right? And look what he's going to say. This answers somebody's question. We've talked about this morning. He says the essential points in the successful use of the law of assumption are these. First and above all, yearning, longing, intense, burning desire.
Passion.
Yep. I think that's really important to point out.
Mm-hmm.
Question ourselves about the things we say we want. How much do we want it? With all your heart, you must want to be different from what you are. Intense, burning desire, combined with intention to make good, is the mainspring of action, the beginning of all successful ventures. In every great passion, there's the word, which achieves its objective, desire is concentrated and intentioned. You must first desire and then intend to succeed. As the heart pants after the water brooks, so pants my soul after thee, O God. He quotes from Psalms.
I got to stop you because you're reading from the website, right?
Yes.
And I'm reading from the book.
Are they different?
Very different. There are chunks of text missing from the book that are in that website.
There are words in brackets.
Ah.
If I don't read the brackets, it sounds like this. With all your heart, you must want to be different from what you are. Intense, burning desire is the mainspring of action, the beginning of all successful ventures. In every great passion, desire is concentrated.
That's what's in the book. That's exactly it. So the question gets raised, where did the brackets come from? And what's that all about? Yeah. And I don't know what the answer to that is,
sure.
but that's very interesting.
There may be more than one manuscript,
Well, that could be.
So, yeah, I don't know.
I don't know either.
He says, blessed are they that hunger and thirst after righteousness, for they shall be filled. So he's using descriptions here of intense desire.
Mm-hmm.
Here the soul is interpreted as the sum of all you believe, think, feel, and accept as true. In other words, your present level of awareness. God, I am, the power of awareness, the source and fulfillment of all desires, and this is in brackets, understood psychologically. I am an infinite series of levels of awareness, and I am what I am according to where I am in the series. This quotation describes how your present level of awareness longs to transcend itself. Righteousness is the consciousness of already being what you want to be. Okay, so that was the first thing that he's talked about, is intense burning desire for something.
Right.
Now, second, he says, cultivate physical immobility, a physical incapacity not unlike the state described by Keats in his Ode to a Nightingale. And this is Keats. A drowsy numbness pains my senses, as though of hemlock I had drunk.
Yeah.
I would suggest not poisoning yourself with hemlock, but
probably not the best idea, no.
Yeah, but he says, it is a state akin to sleep. And we've talked about this a lot. This is basically meditation. But he also encourages us to do these exercises as we're falling asleep,
mm-hmm.
and not just as a meditation. So he says it's a state akin to sleep, but one in which you are still in control of the direction of attention. You must learn to induce this state at will, but experience has taught that it's more easily induced after a substantial meal, or when you wake in the morning feeling very, I love this, when you wake in the morning feeling very loath to arise.
Yeah. I don't want to get up.
I don't want to get up. Then you are naturally disposed to enter this state. The value of physical immobility shows itself in the accumulation of mental force, which absolute stillness brings with it.
Which is true.
It increases your power of concentration.
Yep.
Yes, I believe so too.
I've experienced it, yeah.
Yeah. And then he quotes, be still and know that I am God. Of course, we've talked about this over and over, that when Neville talks about God, he's talking about our imagination. And so it makes sense that when we get still, and I think this is something that I counsel people all the time to do, is to take the time to get still and quiet. We're so busy all the time, most of us. And we're also in a place usually where we're getting so much information streaming at us from phones and computers and televisions and everything around us that we often don't have many moments of stillness and quietness. So Neville's saying, very important. He says, in fact, the greater energies of the mind seldom break forth save when the body is stilled and the door of the senses closed to the objective world. And then the third thing, he says the third and last thing to do is to experience in your imagination what you would experience in reality had you achieved your goal. Now this is in brackets. You must gain it in imagination first, for imagination is the very door to the reality of that which you seek. But use imagination masterfully, not as an onlooker thinking of the end, but as a partaker thinking from the end. Imagine that you possess a quality or something you desire which hitherto has not been yours. Surrender yourself completely to this feeling until your whole being is possessed by it.
It's an interesting phrase, by the way. I want to interrupt you. Surrender yourself completely to this feeling. That's not the way we often think about, feeling something. Surrender to the feeling. Give into it. Just like relax into it. Make it inevitable in your mind. This feeling is all that there is. It's an interesting way to express it.
That's when we were talking about revisiting a conversation or a situation where we felt wronged and we needed the apology earlier in the show today. I was trying to make that point to when you revise that, to pay attention to the feeling that you feel and allow yourself to enjoy it.
Right.
To enjoy the fact that it was lighthearted, that it was easy, that it wasn't, rude and painful.
Yep.
He says this state differs from reverie in this respect. It is the result of a controlled imagination and a steadied, concentrated attention, whereas reverie is the result of an uncontrolled imagination, usually just a daydream.
Big difference.
In the controlled state, a minimum of effort suffices to keep your consciousness filled with the feeling of the wish fulfilled. The physical and mental immobility of this state is a powerful aid to voluntary attention and a major factor of minimum effort. The application of these 3 points, desire, physical immobility, and the assumption of the wish already fulfilled, is the way to, he says, he has hyphens in the word atonement. Mm-hmm. So it says at one-ment.
Right.
It's the way to at one-ment or union with your objective. And then this is in brackets. The first point is thinking of the end with intention to realize it. The third point is thinking from the end with the feeling of accomplishment. The secret of thinking from the end is to enjoy being it. The minute you make it pleasurable and imagine that you are it, you start thinking from the end. One of the most prevalent misunderstandings is that this law works only for those having a devout or religious objective. This is a fallacy. It works just as impersonally as the law of electricity works. It can be used for greedy, selfish purposes as well as noble ones. But it should always be borne in mind that ignoble thoughts and actions inevitably result in unhappy consequences.
So
this chapter had a lot of good information.
Yeah, he laid out his 3-point plan here, which is typical of what happens with the law of attraction teachers. They break it up usually into 3 points. And in his case, his 3-point plan is to experience the desire, make yourself physically immobile, and then while you're in that state like that, then assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled. Interesting approach.
And to be careful of thinking from the end and not of the end. And in my experience, the best way to make sure that happens is to tap into the physical sensations and feelings of it.
Mm-hmm. And let's reiterate what the difference is. What is the difference again between from the end and of the end?
Well, when I'm thinking of the end, oftentimes it's more like watching a movie.
Mm-hmm.
So if I would say to you, well, can you picture yourself? You're sitting over there at your desk and you're watching, new subscribers, right? If I imagine it that way, it's like you're watching a movie of yourself. Oh, there I am. Look, I'm really successful.
Mm-hmm.
And you're thinking of the end. You're thinking of this success that's going to come.
Right.
But when we think from the end, that's when I'm saying, well, imagine yourself, you're sitting in your desk chair and you can feel the desktop under your hands and your feet are on the floor right there at your desk and you can feel the temperature in the room. All of a sudden you're in your body now. You're thinking from the end because it's you and you're in there and your eyes are seeing the numbers on the screen. Oh, look, new subscribers, right? And you're seeing comments from people and you're nodding your head because you're happy about, look at what's going on here. When you picture it that way, now you're thinking from the end.
It's a really good point. Because I know I'd make the mistake many times of thinking of the end. I make those little movies myself, and you're absolutely right. That is not as directly involved as being and thinking from the end. Because when you're experiencing the whole thing. It's not just a movie that you're sitting and watching in a theater. So, yeah.
Right, and I've actually, I still have that happen sometimes. I'll go
me too.
Create an imagination and I'll realize that I'm like looking at myself instead of being in my own body. And the quickest way I know to alleviate that and to correct it is the physical sensations, is to pay attention. It's the same way in regular life when we're not doing a process to create something. The quickest way to bring yourself back into the present moment. And remember, all of our fears and worries are always attached to the past or the future. They're not in the present. And so the quickest way to bring yourself back into the present is to notice the temperature in the room. Or is there a taste in your mouth? Can you smell anything in the room? What sounds can you hear? Like right now, I can hear you when you speak, and I can hear cars driving by. And when I'm paying attention to those sensations, it will automatically bring me back into the present moment. And so that will lessen worries and fears.
That's true. Now we have a few minutes left, and Suraj has a question that we haven't addressed yet. He says, does our diet matter in manifesting and in morning meditation? Because I'm a pure non-vegetarian. I eat whatever is available as my job requires lots of traveling. So please have a conversation about that.
I think that it does. This is one of the things that I will address with private clients right away. And it's funny because people often hire me because they want to create some big magic. And then I ask them questions that are very mundane, right? But the questions are like, how do you sleep? Do you sleep well? How's your sleep hygiene? Right? And what about your diet? Do you eat enough? A lot of people, they get so busy like, oh, I forget to eat. I grab something here or there, but it's like, do you eat enough? And do you try to eat foods that are healthy? And I'm not someone who thinks that you should, eat things that you don't enjoy. I think you should have a balance there. Yes, you should eat things that are good for you as well. I am not a vegetarian. I don't think that that is necessary. Some of us have different dietary needs. Some of us thrive on a vegetarian diet, and some of us do not thrive on a vegetarian diet. So, we're all different, but sleeping, eating, breathing, moving your body, I think those are all really basic types of self-care. And when we take good care of ourselves, we're sending out energy, an energy signal to the universe, if you will, that says I'm worth taking care of. I take good care of myself, and the universe will mirror that back to you.
Right. So
yeah, I actually think it's a great question, and I do think it's important. Do your best. We're all doing the best we can, right? So the fact that you ask the question tells me that you have a consciousness about it. You're conscientious about it. And so, yes, healthy food, clean water, and enough sleep. Those are all important to our manifestation processes because we live in this body. When people say, well, I'm not my body. Well, really? Yeah, you are. Are you more than just a physical body? Yes, but we are in this body. And so this body is the foundation of everything we manifest.
Absolutely. I totally agree. And I would even add that it usually isn't all that difficult, even when you're traveling, to eat a little bit better. It's just, shifting your pattern a little bit. So if your tendency is to eat fast food, just go find a regular sit-down restaurant. If your tendency is to eat stuff that's not high quality, find a local grocery store and just get something high quality. It takes a couple extra minutes, but it's not that big of a deal. Just don't make it a big deal. Make it something like, I got to do this because I need to take care of myself.
Let it be easy. Let the universe know you want to manifest some healthy things to eat.
Absolutely, yeah.
Right.
So once again, another wonderful hour. We've had a lot of really good questions. So thank you, everybody who is listening to the live stream and sharing the questions. And by the way, if you are also if you are a listener who is listening to the recording, a podcast listener, you can be included too. Just send an email or a text message, or through the various social media, send a message to us, and we'll include you in the next show as well. But in the meantime, Cindy, this has been good. I look forward to talking to you later this afternoon as we continue our exploration of Neville.
I will be back.
I will as well. We hope you'll join us next time as well here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.